It's been a while since I've done one of these, so time to get to work. Today I'm going to make a silicone mold of this vintage radio knob. This little guy has a couple of challenges to overcome, such as carefully casting the little pointer detail, as well as stopping silicone from getting into this opening in the back by the set screw. To prevent that from happening, I'll use a little bit of clay to fill in the open space. I made sure that the clay only filled in the open gap and didn't end up covering the detail of the set screw. With that issue addressed, I can move on to building the mold box. For this project, I'm going to use this foam board. I start by tracing out the shape of the radio knob and cutting out a square around it. I then cut out a strip of foam that is the height of the radio knob plus a ½ inch. I then cut the strip of foam board down to size to match the base of the mold box. With the 4 strips of foam cut to size, I carefully glue everything together, making sure that everything is completely sealed. Next, I'm going to cut out a piece of foam that is the exact shape of the radio knob. This will make it slightly taller, and when the mold is finished, it will create some extra room in the mold so that I can pour in some extra resin. With the spacer cut out and the mold box complete, I can finally glue everything together. The silicone for this project was actually mixed for a different project. In fact, it was originally mixed for the valve wheel mold that I made a few years ago. I made this mold as what I call an overpour mold. Basically, when I do a project where I can't calculate exactly how much silicone to use, I'll have a couple of smaller molds off to the side where I can pour any excess silicone that might be left over in the mixing bucket. That way, none of my expensive silicone goes to waste. When pouring the silicone for this project, I took extra care to make sure that the silicone completely filled the opening for the set screw and that there was no air trapped inside, creating a bubble that would lose that detail. With the silicone having set overnight, it's time to crack it open and see how it turned out. Well, it looks like it turned out great, and it's time to make a few castings. But first, I need to do a really quick cleanup on all the edges, and then I can get to making a few radio knobs. For this casting, I'll be using resin from West Systems and a bit of black resin pigment. I'm not sponsored, it's just what I'm using. Once fully mixed, I'll use my pressure pot at 50 psi to make sure that this casting comes out bubble-free. So, the reason that I made the little foam insert that went under the radio knob to create the extra space to pour some extra resin into this mold is because when I pour the recently mixed resin into the mold, the resin has a lot of air and bubbles mixed into it. That air takes up space. When I put the mold into my pressure pot and the pressure squishes the bubbles down, those bubbles are no longer taking up space in the mold. The previously full mold now has empty space at the top. The foam spacer created a reservoir for me to pour in some extra resin that will take the place of the bubbles. My previous radio knob molds don't have this, and would sometimes end up with a concave bottom to the final casting. Making this mold this way resolves that issue. The only downside would be that I get castings with this extra bit on the bottom, but it's not a big problem because I can easily take care of it with my sander. And there it is! The mold turned out great, but getting the little pointer to cast fully without an air bubble getting trapped at the end requires a bit of extra attention. Eventually, I got a couple of castings to turn out perfect and with no flaws. I also made a few with some different pigments and powders to get some different effects. I've actually made 2 other videos about making molds of vintage radio knobs, so be sure to check out those videos here. Those videos actually have some additional or different information that wasn't included in this video. And with that, I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching!